Hey guys, today we're diving into how colonialism messed with people's minds. So colonialism isn't just about taking land and resources, it got into people's minds, literally. Meet Frantz Fanon. This guy knew how colonialism fractures identities. Specifically in black skin, white masks, Fanon talks about how colonized people internalize the colonizer's view of them. They end up kind of with a split identity. And he says the black man has two dimensions, one with his fellows, the other with the white man. Now imagine always feeling like you're two people at once. That's what colonialism does. Now Guatemala specifically, the Spanish conquest and the brutal civil war left indigenous Guatemalans kind of juggling between their indigenous culture and the colonial identity forced on them. This causes identity crises, self-alienation, and cultural dislocation. It's like living in a constant state of psychological conflict. Canada Yates dives into how movies shape our unconscious. In Mexican cinema, machismo is a big deal coming from Spanish colonial values. Yates kind of mentions, quote, cultural representations in film perpetuate the power dynamics established during colonial rule. Basically meaning Mexican men feel pressured to live up to this tough guy image. The unconscious absorbs these ideas, leading to insecurity, aggression. It's a cycle that's really hard to break in Mexican culture. In Mexico, machismo pressures men to be dominant, authoritative, leading to internalized stress and identity conflicts. So it's not just a cultural thing, it's deeply, and I mean deeply, psychoanalytic. The unconscious internalization of these ideals creates a cycle of psychological subjugation, like trying to be the alpha in a pack of wolves. Moving on to my guy Kevin Duong, he says violence is a way to reclaim identity and fight back against colonial oppression. In Colombia specifically, centuries of colonial rule and conflicts with groups like the FARC have left a legacy of violence. Duong argues, quote, the colonial history of dominance and subjugation is intricately linked to the expression of identity through violence. Basically, the unconscious mind uses violence to deal with trauma and assert identity. Moving to Colombia, the cycle of violence is a direct response to colonial trauma. Guerrilla groups and state forces use violence to assert control and reclaim agency. This unconscious drive towards violence reflects the deep-seated need to resolve internalized trauma. Alright, quick wardrobe change. No, you're not seeing things. I had some technical difficulties and voila, now I have a new outfit. Anyways, let's move on. Let's not question it. I don't want to hear it. Let's keep going about the video. So now let's talk religion, specifically about Catholicism. It is huge in Latin America, but it really wasn't always that way. It was brought over by European colonizers as a means of control. Now, before colonization, indigenous people had their own ways of spiritual practices. Today, many Latin Americans practice Catholicism, but it's important to remember it was a tool of power, not something passed down by ancestors. The Catholic faith was kind of used to enforce colonial rule, making it a part of unconscious colonial legacy. The way people worship, celebrate, and even how they perceive morality, all influenced by colonialism. It's like someone changing your playlist without really asking. You just kind of have to get used to it. Now, colonialism ended at different times across Latin America. Spain's political ties specifically to Americas ended around 1898, but the cultural impacts are still there. Political repression, economic exploitation, you name it. They've all led to poverty and to rise of tourism. Now, countries market their cultures to attract visitors, which sometimes commodifies cultural symbols and practices. But hey, not all commodification is bad. Artists in Peru and Mexico can create inclusivity by selling their artwork, preserving cultural knowledge and histories. It's important that centering indigenous perspectives is the key to post-colonial theory, giving a voice to narratives often excluded from history books. For instance, this mask right here, it's a wood mask from Guatemala, which represents a Spanish conquistador. It was crafted by an indigenous Maya artist. It's used in festivals, reenacting historical conflicts between the Spanish and the Maya. These festivals preserve history and promote cultural pride, blending Spanish and Maya heritage. Now, this mask from Bolivia is used in Carnival. It symbolizes the blend of indigenous and Catholic practices. And masks like these tell stories of Spanish conquest and local legends. It's keeping cultural traditions alive while evolving with time. Alright, time for some more brains. Homi Bhabha, Edward Said, and Aimé Césaire, they kind of add layers to our understanding. Bhabha specifically talks about hybridity, how post-colonial identities are a mix of cultures. It's like making a cultural smoothie, but with a touch of bitterness from the past. Bhabha's concept of hybridity shows that post-colonial identities are always evolving. Cites' Orientalism explains how the West created stereotypes to dominate the East. He says, quote, Orientalism is a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. Basically, they made up stuff to feel superior to other people. In Césaire, he highlights the dehumanizing effects of colonialism. In Discourse on Colonialism, he says, quote, colonization equals thinkification. Basically turning people into objects, objectifying them, turning them into things. Not cool. Now, these insights show how deeply colonial histories influence the unconscious mind. It's like colonialism set up shop in our heads and they have never left since. So what's the big takeaway? Colonialism isn't just history, it's a psychological legacy. It's in the unconscious minds of people in formerly colonized nations, shaping identities and societal roles, and understanding this helps us heal and move forward from it. By diving into the unconscious, we can address the psychological wounds of colonialism and build a more empathetic world. And this isn't just some abstract theory, it still impacts people today. Think about ongoing racial tensions, identity struggles, and stereotypes in media. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement. It highlights ongoing racial injustices that stem from colonial mindsets. In Latin America, indigenous communities continue to fight for their rights and recognition, facing systemic discrimination. The media still perpetuates stereotypes that originated during colonial times, affecting how people see themselves and others. Indigenous groups in Brazil, for instance, are fighting to protect their land from exploitation, a struggle rooted in colonial desire for resources. And similarly, in the US, Native American communities are still trying to reclaim their cultural heritage and resist the erasure of these identities. Education is also a battleground. Many countries are working to include indigenous perspectives into their curricula, which ensures that history of colonialism and its impacts are taught accurately. And this helps foster a more inclusive understanding of history and its effect on present-day society. And that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for watching. If you want, you can take a look into the description on the sites and resources that I used for this video, specifically for the quotes I used, as well as most of the information that I got to make this video. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day and have a nice summer break. Bye!